is a specific concept and terminology here that I am currently in the process of developing, which I would call the breaking point. This is basically the specific trigger that finally makes a guy decide to completely turn his back on the idea of pursuing relationships with women, you know? It is the moment he chooses to deliberately embrace a celibate lifestyle. And to give you a better example of this, let us take a look at some other guys. Let us examine some very well-known and influential figures from the manosphere. I will obviously talk in more detail about the specific people from the Green Movement. We could take, for example, Raging Golden Eagle, we could take TFM, we could take Stardust. For instance, Raging Golden Eagle is a content creator who must be in his 40s by now. He's already pretty old, a beta guy, a nerd. And he's the kind of guy who says that well-known phrase basically saying that he thanks feminism. Raging Golden Eagle himself used to say that he thanks feminism because if it were not for it, because of feminism, he would probably be married with 2 kids, and who knows if he wouldn't have already gone through a divorce because the guy is already around 40 years old. So in the United States, that would already be considered Generation X, and we know that Generation X got divorced a lot. Obviously, in Generation Y, divorces kept increasing too, but in Generation Y, the number of marriages also dropped a lot. Whereas in Generation X, there was still a significant number of marriages. Pretty much equivalent to the boomers, except with a ton of divorces. So basically, the breaking point for Raging on the Eagle was realizing that if he kept chasing women, got married, and had kids, he would basically become a simp. He would become a slave to his wife and kids and wouldn't have time for his hobbies or anything like that. So that was his choice, especially because even in his videos he made the comparison. It is almost as if marriage were treated like a professional job. Looking at the whole history of marriage and divorce laws, dating all the way back to the era of the 1960s and 1970s, he would often reflect and say the following words. He said, "Imagine you have a job, but every single year that goes by, your salary either remains exactly the same or gradually decreases. The number of benefits you have gets cut each year, and also your workload increases, right? Your demands and responsibilities increase. Basically, would you want to stay in that job indefinitely, or would you just flip the company the middle finger and walk out?" So basically, that was the breaking point for Raging Olegro. That essentially the marriage arrangement is something that not only doesn't bring any benefit to men in the current situation, but with each passing year, the benefits keep decreasing. Then, if you take, for example, Stardust Thinking Net, I think it must be a pretty old video already, and basically, for him, the breaking point was realizing that women are simply just for pleasure, it's just hedonism. There was even another video with a young guy, he must have been about 19 years old, who was looking to get a girlfriend, and then telling his story. Finknape usually reads the guy's emails, and he was telling Finknape, like, is dating just this? Is it just a girl to chat with? Going out, having dinner, grabbing a snack, walking around the street, is that it? There's nothing more to it? And then Stardust replied, yes, that's all there is, man. There's nothing more than that. It's simply someone for you to have sex with and go out to eat together. That's it. But also, another point Stardust made was in a video from back when he still interacted with Barbarossa, where he says that was when he realized that all his ex-girlfriends would always do the last. There would come a point where the woman would pressure him to do something she wanted to do or wanted him to do, right? And then she would say something like, oh, if you don't do this, that's fine. I'll find someone who will, you know? So basically, he realized that not only, as he always says, every relationship is transactional, but that women nowadays make this completely clear. They make it totally clear to guys by giving ultimatums saying that the guy is completely disposable. That if the guy doesn't do what she wants him to do, she'll simply end the relationship and find another guy. And in this case, I'm not just talking about marriage, I'm talking about dating as well, you know? So let's say, imagine the guy is dating and the woman is already giving him ultimatums during the relationship. If that's not a red flag for the guy to just not want to have any kind of more serious relationship, like marriage with this woman, then I don't know what is. So the breaking point of the Stardust was when he realized that for women, all men are interchangeable, disposable, replaceable. So logically, this makes the guy see that, look, I don't have to invest. I don't have to invest in anything beyond something casual. For example, Stardust has already been practicing celibacy, I think since 2013. Raging Golden Eagle has probably been practicing since 2014, 2015, around there. And then you also have, for example, the TFM. TFM started his channel around 2015, which was when what came before Me Too appeared in California, which was yes means yes, yes means yes was basically that thing. What's the term? I think it's prescription. When in universities in California, in the United States, a bunch of rape accusations started to appear. I don't know how many. Months had already passed, you know? So, like, a woman would have a relationship with a guy, either dating or casual, and then after a few months, the woman would go and make a rape accusation. At the time, people commented that this was starting in universities and that it would eventually become law. And nowadays, we see that there are a bunch of countries that already have this. Initially, these rape accusations had to be made within the first month after the rape happened. Now, man, it can go by. And after this, yes means yes thing, when the Me Too years came along, you know, like for example, in the cases of Harvey Weinstein and Bill Cosby, and that was the moment when TFM was like, no, celibacy now, I don't want anything to do with women, the risk is way too high. Especially because TFM, he was accused of rape when he was in high school. I think a girlfriend of his cheated on him. He called her a slut or something like that, and the girl made a rape accusation against him. And then in the development of TFM's channel, there's another point that he's mentioned several times, which is that besides the risk of being accused of rape, there's also the issue that when he realized that women have no loyalty, that a woman isn't capable of loving a man the way he wants to be loved, the way a man loves a woman. And from that, he realized, like, man, then women are useless, you know? If a woman isn't capable of giving me what I expect, what I want, then she's useless. So in these cases with content creators, we can see that each man kind of has his own breaking point, the point at which the guy decides to just completely give up on relationships. And you can see that each of these breaking points is different for every man. It depends on the guy's personality, it depends on his values. Basically, the breaking point, mine, when I reached that stage of self actualization in the red pill cycle, was when I realized two things. Forget about this whole love thing, you know, like a woman loving a man the way he wants to be loved, all that stuff. No, that's nonsense, nonsense. That, I don't know, depends on each person. For me, that's just neediness. But for me, it was when I realized two very important things, which are as follows. First of all, women have no loyalty, right? Just this part about women not having loyalty already implies that it's not worth the investment. It's not worth the investment. It's not worth a long-term investment. It really always has to be casual or, at most, a short-term relationship. By short-term, I mean less than 2 years. Because what did we notice? As soon as they allowed no-fault divorce, divorce without blame, where nothing serious is happening at home, they simply allow the divorce. If a woman can ask for a divorce because she's bored, unhappy, or doesn't love the man anymore, or of course she's simply already interested in another guy, just wants to jump to another branch because of hypergamy. So once I realized this, okay, women have no loyalty at all. As soon as divorce was allowed, they simply abandoned the man, abandoned family, children, etc. And they're just following their hypergamy, their hedonism. So that was the first point. For me, the second breaking point, the second turning point for me was this. It was when I realized that not only do they lack loyalty, but they are dependent. They are eternally dependent. They are still dependent on men. They've always been dependent on men, and they always will be dependent on men. What I mean by this is generally, when you're in a relationship with a woman, when you're young, she's young, under 25 years old, the guy thinks the relationship is going smoothly, it's great, an equal relationship. Each has their own place, each pays their own bills. They just go out to have fun and all that. But what guys usually forget is that generally these women are being supported by their fathers, either directly, receiving money from him every month voluntarily, the father supporting his daughter and so on, or as is much more typical nowadays, as it was. We can see by the number of divorced women and single mothers, the girl is receiving child support from her father, and we know that this child support usually continues until she finishes college, which would be around 23, 24, 25 years old. Okay, so right after that, as soon as the child support ends, the help from her father ends, the university scholarship ends, the woman actually starts working, but she doesn't want to change her modus operandi. She doesn't want to think, oh, now I really have to support myself. No. Usually we know what happens. She reaches that epiphany phase, which is between 25 and 30 years old, when the woman magically decides she wants something serious. Why does she want something serious? Because that support she was getting, either from the educational institution or from her father, whether voluntarily or through child support, is over. And then she starts to feel pressured, like, oh no, now I have to find a serious relationship. Now we have to live together. Now I want to know where our relationship is going, you know? Even if the woman doesn't want to have children, because the basic idea has always been, oh no, she'll get pregnant by a man, have a child with him to force him to take care of her and the child for the rest of his life. But with women today, even if she doesn't want to have children, what does she want to set up? A stable union, right? Or maybe even a legal marriage. It doesn't matter if there's a prenuptial agreement or not. We know that in the end, when it comes to divorce, that doesn't really make a difference. So she spends her whole life, when she's a child and when she's young, being supported by her father. Then she's supported by an educational institution. And when she's an adult, she's supported by a bunch of feminist law subsidies and also by social programs that are exclusively for women. And when she reaches the epiphany phase from 25 to 30 years old, she starts that triggering process. A serious relationship, a stable union, a marriage to get another guy to keep supporting her. So that was my breaking point, these 2 points, for 2 reasons. First, because if she doesn't have loyalty, she's not worth a heavy investment, she's not worth a serious commitment for a long-term relationship because she lacks loyalty and she could leave the relationship at any moment. And by that, I mean both the emotional investment as well as the financial investment. If there's no loyalty, then you don't have to be loyal either. But then, if they weren't loyal but they were independent, there wouldn't be a problem, right? Because then you could spend the rest of your life having short term relationships, right? A casual relationship or a short term dating situation of 1 or 2 years, and you'd be safe. Because, like, okay, they're not loyal, but at least they support themselves, you know? So I'm safe. You can have a bunch of equal relationships throughout your life, but then I realized that no, besides not being loyal, they are eternally dependent. Because if you look at what happened, the baby boomer generation, they would get married, have kids, some were housewives, others weren't. But just by getting married and having kids, they guaranteed provision for the rest of their lives, both from the pension, child support for the kids, as well as alimony for her as an ex-wife if they got divorced. And if they stayed married, she would continue to be supported by her husband for the rest of her life. Then came Generation Y, and the number of housewives decreased, and also in Generation X, the number of housewives went down. They entered the job market and universities more, but they still used marriage, reproduction, and stable unions to keep extracting resources, living off the guy's income and being supported by him, either directly or through child support. And now we're getting to Generation Z, and it's the same thing. That is, it doesn't matter what kind of arrangement or which generation we're talking about, what kind of couple arrangement or relationship between a woman or whatever the arrangement is. It doesn't matter if it's marriage, marriage with kids, marriage without kids, a casual relationship or dating. Women are always finding a way to try to pressure and force the guy to become a provider. They always want to be dependent. And the crucial situation happening now here in Brazil since 2018 is that the so-called Me Too movement started to show up here in Brazil. And we're sitting on this pressure cooker, which is simply the fact that at some point, most women are going to realize that today's men, a large portion of them, their group, either by choice or simply due to economic circumstances, don't want to get married, don't want to have children, right? And some have even had vasectomies. Maybe they'll tell the woman, maybe they won't. When women start to realize this, there's going to be a lot of women making accusations of rape, false accusations of rape, simply to get revenge on the guy. This is something I've talked about many times on the channel. I mean, you're having a casual relationship with a girl. She's in that epiphany phase. She wants the relationship to turn into dating and then become something more serious, but you don't want that. When you break up with her, you're running the risk of being accused because she might want to extract some kind of resource from you, maybe a lawsuit, something like that for moral damages, etc. Or she might simply want to get revenge on you because, my God, she, in quotes, wasted her time on you. Or you might already be in a relationship, already dating, but at the you two have never discussed living together or having kids, and then she decides that now she wants to live together, have a common law marriage, get married, and have children, and you have to accept that. If you don't accept it, again, it's a risk, right? So there are several factors, but to put it very simply, my breaking point was this: realizing that they don't have loyalty. If they don't have loyalty, then automatically they're not worth long-term emotional and financial investment, right? But there is the added problem that they are perpetually and completely dependent on you. So, in addition to their total lack of any real loyalty, they still expect you to keep supporting them. But at the same time, They reserve the absolute right to walk away from the relationship and abandon everything at any given moment. Do you understand? To leave the relationship at any moment, and not only that, they actually want you to keep supporting them in some way, even after the relationship ends, whether that is just temporarily or perhaps even indefinitely. Indefinitely. Just look at how this works. I mean, not only do they lack loyalty, but they also believe that their time when they're with you is something that needs to be compensated. Like I mentioned in that old video about the pussy union, right? Prepaid or postpaid. Either you go there, play the traditional role, get married, and support her and so on right away. Or you're going to be a more egalitarian guy who keeps things casual, each one paying their own bills, being equal, but there will come a time when she'll decide, no, now you have to support me. And she'll try to find a way to pressure you emotionally and socially in any way she can to make that happen. And if you don't want to support her, she'll still try to find a way to force you or pressure you legally to support her. So there's simply no reason, it's not justified, there's no benefit. I think maybe, to put it very simply, it's something people have already discussed a lot on Twitter, which is this: man, in 2020, does a guy still want a woman? Wanting a woman is for masochists, man. Wanting a woman is for masochists. To put it simply, this isn't just something from this current generation, it's something that's been happening for the last 3 or 4 generations of women. They're not just no longer pleasant with men because in the past they depended directly on men, either their father or their husband, but because of their political and economic empowerment, they no longer depend on men, so they have no reason to be pleasant with men anymore. Look, it's like they're only pleasant when they want something, but that's really it. That's what women are. Also, over the last 3 or 4 generations, they've been trained from an early age not to do anything for men and to think that they don't have to do anything for men. I mean, basically, not only are they no longer pleasant, but they also think they don't have to do anything for men. Yet, they still believe that all men have to treat them extremely well and that all men are responsible for their protection and provision. In the end, being with a woman is for masochists, man. A guy has to be really whipped, have really low self-esteem, or have serious issues in his head to still want a woman at this point.